Hello, we are here today with Professor Maresi Nerad, who is a professor of higher education at University of Washington in Seattle, USA. She is also the founding director of the Center for Innovation and Research in Graduate Education, based at the same university. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us, Professor. On behalf of the UNIKE project, we would like to ask you a few questions based on your expertise in higher education and specifically on doctoral education. So my first question is, how do you see as the key trends in higher education on a global scale today?
I'm sure many of my colleagues said similar, and so for a project of UNIKE, you can indeed say that worldwide the marketization and commodification of higher education is present and increasing, and it's coming to all countries. So what I would say there is that higher education is both it's sold, it means, and I would divide very much the world in the global north and the global south. In the global north, we see right now that many of the states where traditionally had a old and respected higher education system, governments have reduced the funding. With it, they said, well, you university, you have more autonomy, you're free, but we give you less money. In the case of Germany, for example, it was said, well, we now have East Germany, we need to take care of it, we cannot give so much money, but your university, we are not controlling you from the lender anymore, but we give you more freedom. So this, I think, is anywhere, but we have to see it in the context, because in the global south, what's happening more, that many countries who didn't have a elaborate higher education system, and specifically not doctoral education, they are now, the governments very much believe in the neoliberal model that if we have more innovations, then we can get economic growth, and we have for our people in our country a better life. And often politicians make a very simple straight line and thinking, innovation are those people who have creative thoughts, and in a doctoral, in a dissertation, you have to have an original piece of research. So that's why it's a lot also investment in doctoral education, and specifically in science and engineering, because that can be products, and then you can indeed have new products which can be sold and the university get revenues. But also it means more international students coming in because they pay a higher fee, and so university get more money. So you see an exchange from the south to the north, and unfortunately many countries, I said, who now have extending the higher education system, extending the doctoral education, using the market model, which in fact in the US had existed more or less since the beginning of higher education. And so in it, so that's one trend, and I can talk and want to talk more about how the US deals with it, but we can talk about that later. But we should not forget the other side, that indeed also, even if we talk about marketization, governments also and politicians and various sectors in society want a better life for their people. And in some way it really means better health, better living conditions, better social formation, and a more democratization, because many nations around the world don't have it. So it's not only that countries want, consume more, but we need to not only see the side, they're buying now useless stuff, we don't need all that stuff, that's also true, but also seeing that more people have indeed somewhat better life. And I think we have this proverb I learned in the US, throwing out the baby with the bathtub. So yes, while something is good, but then it goes to the very extreme.
Yes, so you're just advocating for a not very extreme perspective and having a balanced...
Well, understanding what's going on and then being able to make a choice. So I feel, for example, when now universities around the world have accepted a business model of quality control, you look at the input, throughput, output, and impact, that while I would say indeed in the good old times of universities, and they got the money from the state, there was some really not using the money efficiently and so on. So some checking what's really done with that money, which is taxpayers' money, you know, is useful. But if it's an only numbering, how fast did you get the degree, how much you did, then it's really the other side. So I think that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that specifically in many universities have that now, this incentivized budget, that you say how many student credit hours, or I learned here in Australia, how many buns on the seat is counted. And this is now becoming the planning instead of content, what is needed. So, however, I also see as a big major trend that countries and people in there are concerned, where is education and higher education as a public good? So these are my 4 major trends.
That's very interesting that you mentioned the distinction between global north and the global south. And in this context, I would like to ask you actually, what do you think are the transformations happening to higher education in your own context that you've been working in, which is the US?
Yes, so as I said before, the US and the higher education system has been always driven by a market. That means demand and supply, and then specifically after, and the higher education system in the US doesn't have a ministry, but it's a state. And yet there is, whenever, like in the Sputnik shock in the 50s, then the government comes in more and gives money because, for example, it realized US people need to be better in mathematics and engineering, and they need to be better in languages. So, you know, so there is, of course, a reaction. But overall, I would think, because of this long existing market system, the people have found in the higher education system a way to wiggle through and still have some humane living. And I want to mention here one institution of higher education which is very little known outside the US. And even within the US, it's understudied, and that's a community college.
Community college.
A community college is a higher education institution which helps people who didn't get, when they were younger, finished high school, to finish that. Recent immigrants who don't speak the language, who don't know what to do in the country, how to find a job, helps them. And it's for free. But also they help people to get an associate degree, a 2-year degree, for example, would be, or even an applied bachelor. The people in the Red Cross who drive that car for Red Cross at an emergency, that they know how to give first help, first aid. So it's a college.
So you would think this as a positive example in the
It's
context?
a very positive example. That's a higher education institution too.
And about doctoral education more specifically, do you think, how would you situate it in this debate? Is it still affected by the by similar transformations that you mentioned?
Yeah, in doctoral education, what we have on one hand, as everywhere in the world, we see all the trends, as I say before, and we see more people getting a doctorate, and also, and while that's good that not only a elite, like before, where the parents had money and they could get a doctorate and study, and they did not need to think about earning a living afterwards, but just do la pour la. Now more can do that, and specifically more from groups in society who had never access to it. In the US, it would be not all, but many African American, Black people, many recent immigrants, Chicano people, and so on. So that's a very positive trend. While in it we see again a new stratification. Some in the doctoral education who get a very well paid and very rich and very quality education, and some who just get, you know, basically find their way through, and it's okay, doctoral education, not the best. So, yeah, that I would say comes in the role in us as professors, but we can talk.
Okay, thank you very much. And as you may know, in our project UNIKE, Universities in the Knowledge Economy, we look at, a lot about the role of universities in the economy, about universities being enrolled in this process of producing knowledge, producing workers for the economy. What are your views on that topic? Is this something that you see happening in the context that you work in?
Well, of course, but I would frame it also differently. I say, in the past, in that question, it sounds to me like, oh, in the good old days, the university was so wonderful, it didn't push people immediately on the market. Well, in the good old days, in the ivory tower universities, the people who were studying specifically for a doctorate, you can think of Goethe. He comes from a rich family. He didn't need to earn, in that sense, a living. So for the market, yes, our people, they need a job, and we shall help them get a job, but it needs to be in a context where they also get the tools to analyze what's going on and having more freedom to make decisions and choice. Do I want to just consume more? Do I want to participate in the trend? So that's why I think it's exciting nowadays with our role as instructor, as faculty, working with doctoral students, to give them the tools and also the technical means to really and the expertise in certain field to be able to analyze wherever there are the society, be it in NGOs or in industry or in business or in academia, and then do both. Get a job and live.
So you're saying we shouldn't really idealize the past and that we should just work with the current situation. Is this one of the positive outcomes that you see of these recent developments and transformations in higher education, what you just mentioned?
Well, it's our next generation exactly, who really wants and fights for that. They need a job and they want a job, but they also see we don't want to be boxed in. And so it's on us to give them the tools, as I said, to analyze wherever they are, the society, and then get a job and be able to contribute in another way. And the positive transformation I see nowadays, and universities too, really have opened up whole new sectors around the environment and sustainability, and many of the next generation flock to that issue. We want to have different energy. We want wind energy, sun. We don't want to just exploit our earth more. We want to work on health issue. We don't want the Ebola in Africa and just say, oh, glad I'm not living there, I don't need to take care. And also we want to understand the whole world. And as I often say as an example, in the older days, each nation, produced really a lot of chemical toxic garbage and kind of put it to the corner of the next nation because it's not us, and then they have to deal with it. Now, our younger generation really understands we're living in a world, even if there are political boundaries, and we need to consider what we do in our home country, also in other countries. And I think these are wonderful trends.
So you're saying it's more about creating critical citizens?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for joining us today, Professor Maresi Nerad.
Thank you very much.